everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Attendance Bias. I am your host, Brian Weinstein. I think that all Phish fans, or fans of live music in general, would agree that the venue in which you see a show is inextricably linked to your experience at that show. It's almost impossible to separate the setting from the experience. We go deep into that idea with today's guest, Jordan, the founder and owner of the VenueLlama website, as well as Fire on the Mountain Chicken Wings restaurant. Today, Jordan chose a segment from one of his favorite shows that he thinks expresses pretty much everything a Phish show can be. The second half of September 3rd, 2022 at Dick's. The portion that we discussed today includes the Moma Dance, Into No Quarter, Into 2001, and closing the second set with Split Open and Melt. Dick's is probably the most represented venue on this podcast, and I'm thrilled that Jordan chose this section and that show because it's another gem to explore from Dick's. A theme that runs throughout our conversation today is our opinion, our references, and our general romanticizing of various concert venues for live music, both domestic and international. Of course, a venue can provide the ultimate attendance bias, and I think Jordan and I did a great job investigating that aspect of the concert-going experience, as well as how he hopes that VenueLlama can make going to a show the best possible experience it can be. So let's join Jordan to talk about chicken wings, Spanish architecture, and Freetown Christiana in Denmark as we discuss the last segment of Set 2 from September 3rd, 2022 at Dick's. Jordan, welcome to Attendance Bias. How are you today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on. I'm psyched to be here.
Psyched to have you here. Thank you for being here. And I am excited to talk about your pick for today's episode, which is a very specific part of a Phish show. It is the second half of the second set from September 3rd, 2022 at Dick's at Commerce City, Denver, Colorado. But specifically, we're here to talk about the Moma Dance, Into No Quarter, Into 2001, and maybe not, we'll see when we get there, closes up with Split Open and Melt. So usually people pick a full show or they pick a set or a single song. I'm excited to talk about a segment.
I'm excited to talk about it too. This segment, we'll get more into it, but I remember being at the show and just feeling like that particular segment just really encapsulates what Phish is about.
But before we get to Phish, before we get to Dick's or 2022, anything like that, you are also here to present, introduce, and promote a project that you've been working on called VenueLlama. Could you explain, take 2 minutes with the elevator pitch for our listeners, what is VenueLlama?
VenueLlama is a platform. It's built to help concert goers basically have the best live music experience possible. It's like an insider's guide. Like we provide essential venue intel such as parking tips, bag policies, ADA accessibility information. We also provide local recommendations for nearby bars, restaurants. Something else we just started is we started this database of Phish head and head-owned businesses in different cities. So that's all part of it. When you're going to a new city or new venue to see Phish, I think it'd just be great to promote and help out just local businesses and local businesses that are owned by fans in our community. It's basically just to maximize your time when you're going to a show so you could just focus on the music. We do the work, and so people just don't have to stress out about all the unknowns going to a show. And also like providing recommendations from fellow fans like us. There's a place on all the venue listings where you can leave your own comments about whatever you feel like, about the sound at a venue, what the security is like at a venue, like how much you're going to be patted down walking into a show. Also like part of it, like if you have allergies or if you're gluten-free, like knowing like where you can go in the venue to get food that, comports with your dietary restrictions, stuff like that.
So to me, it kind of sounds like a combination or a mashup of the fan magazine Surrender to the Flow with TripAdvisor kind of put together.
Yeah, that's I hadn't thought of it that way, but I am a big fan of that site, Surrender to the Flow. Looking at Surrender to the Flow, a lot of times, she'll start threads just asking for, recommendations about places to eat. And I think that's great and not wanting to take away from that, but just kind of wanting to just keep it all in one place also, like add on to that stuff. And, a lot of times, a lot of this information is on venues' websites. Sometimes it can be a little hard to find. So that's part of it too, just keeping all this information like in one spot, so people can go and get the bag policies, water policies, but also get the seating charts and, spending less time like fumbling through the venue websites.
What were the origins of VenueLlama? Like, what inspired the idea? And when did you begin working on it?
I'd say the idea was inspired just by going to shows for like 35 years and just realizing that when I go to shows and friends of mine go to shows, that there's just always so many questions, like, things that we talked about, but also like where's the quickest line to get into the venue? And still there's just so many questions and questions that I have and people have. And I figured that there hasn't been a resource like that necessarily. Like I was saying, there's, sites like, Surrender to the Flow and, different Reddit threads. But part of it is just, like I said, just to get it all in one spot. So it's easier.
Those questions that you mentioned, I had a similar thought, and that's what inspired me to do my venue preview series. It's mostly on social media like Facebook, but also you mentioned Reddit, that I found in the last, let's say, 10-ish years, maybe 12 years, that there's become this kind of learned helplessness from Phish fans or live music fans in general, that they need to know everything there is to possibly know about a venue
Yeah,
before they go in. There's no room for uncertainty. There's kind of a positive and a negative to it. The negative is there's no room for surprise or there's no room for discovery. I mean, nothing will ever beat climbing to the top of that hill at the gorge. Let's say you can't
right.
explain that in words on a website or even in a podcast. You can explain it, but nothing can help you understand that feeling.
Right.
But then there's the positive to it, like what you were saying. If I have certain dietary needs, like gluten free or lactose intolerant or whatever, what restaurants are there around? And the idea of supporting fan or head owned shops around the area, businesses, I think it's a really good idea for a resource that people can make one click. I assume it's a website, right? It's VenueLlama.com.
Yes.
Right, with two L's, VenueLlama.com.
Yep.
So, and for
Yeah.
the people who are picturing it right now, they're in their cars on their way to work, picturing it. Is it like a database that you click on a venue or you search for a venue? Can you talk me through the platform?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, you can search, search for the venues. You can do it by state. You can do it by region. A search bar. You can just type in the name of the venue. So there's different ways that you can find it, and then the venue listing comes up where we list, like I was saying, all the policies. The bag policies, the water policies, the parking information, the Uber and Lyft drop off information. Seating charts. Yeah, and then there's also an option where you can, click to leave a review or add comments about the venue. You can rate the venue on a star system. And I will say too, it's also evolving. Like the site and platform is still in its infancy. We're trying to add venues all the time, and not just big venues, like local, smaller independent type venues. And I live in Portland, Oregon, so kind of, we have a lot of venues across the country. But right now, I'm feeling like it's smart for us to just focus on Portland and really build out like the Portland directories. There's also content on the website. You were asking about the mission essentially, and it's to make the whole experience better, and it's to also like encourage venues to step up their game. And I want to work with venues too, but we've been interviewing some people that own venues because we also want to share information about challenges that venue owners face, because I feel like that's an important part. So a lot of times you go to concerts and you have questions like, why isn't the venue doing this, or why isn't this better? So I also want to help showcase the challenges that the venues are facing, and why certain things are harder to do than others, or just kind of exchange more information from both sides. of
Is that
the
to help concert goers understand, like to develop some sort of empathy or at least understanding between the two, or do you see that more as like a feature of it, like interview with general manager of I don't know the Tweeter Center. I don't even know if the Tweeter Center is still a venue
uh,
name
right.
anymore, if they've already changed
Yeah,
hands. But
yeah,
is
probably.
what's your vision for that? Is it in terms of because as a concert goer, I'll be honest, I'm not always thinking about the production side. I just want to know the
Right.
stuff you were talking about earlier. So, just
Yeah.
to press a little bit, what benefit would it be to me, the concert goer, to know about why the people at Forest Hills Stadium are such jerks sometimes?
Haha. Yeah, I just find that interesting, just as someone that goes to concerts, and also that owns a business too, I guess. In my other life, I own restaurants, and I know there's a lot of times there's just certain things that you wish customers would know. For example, people are, complaining about prices a lot. If you could just explain about food costs and stuff like that, but you don't, So I just feel like it's also partially giving a voice to the venues too, because there's, a place where concert goers or, people like us can leave reviews about the venues. So I feel like I also want to give the opportunity to, people running the venues. And I feel like also there's just a lot of people behind the scenes that just don't get any recognition. I feel like just knowing everything that goes into running a venue or a business just helps. If you understand that, I just feel like it helps. The understanding kind of helps the experience.
Right, which is I brought up TripAdvisor before. That's one of my favorite parts about it when you see the responses from the businesses. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like when I leave a
Yeah,
review, because I love when I go on a trip and I come back, I love leaving positive reviews. If I have an issue with the business, I'm not likely to leave anything online.
hmm,
I don't think that's fair to your point because I
yeah,
don't know the whole story. But I love
right,
writing positive reviews of even if it's a like a DoubleTree hotel. There's a billion of them and they're all the same, but I still like it as a customer getting the little note that says like from I don't know, Kevin, the manager of this DoubleTree saying, "Thanks for the glowing review, Brian. We hope to see you again in your future travels." Like it might be a copy paste, but it's like, "Oh,
right.
there's someone on the other end."
Yeah, absolutely. And you're unlike most people because it seems like most people will just kind of go in when they have negative things to say. So that's great that you do that. But I will say too, just like I feel like in our scene where going to concerts is just such a big part of our lives. And I feel like the venue just is just obviously a huge part of that. I know that the older that I've gotten, I just get a little choosier about the concerts and where I'm going to go. Like if I'm, traveling out of state to see some shows where I can't do that as much these days. I just want to go first, check out some venues that I haven't been to before. Such an integral part of the experience where I want to go to venues that are, just that you keep hearing about that are just interesting venues with great sound and easy to move about. It's such an important part of our lives. And there hasn't been as much like focus and breaking down of that.
I agree. Well, I also think that a lot of people who go to a lot of live music shows like us, especially in our scene, at the level of Phish and even Dead and Company, even though they're not a traditional touring band anymore, a lot of these sheds, at least in the Northeast, I know you are not in the Northeast, but speaking to my experience, are kind of interchangeable. Phish plays the Men, they play Merriweather Post, they might play Camden, they might play Great Woods, or whatever corporate name is now titled those venues. If you put a blindfold on me, twirled me around in a circle 10 times, and then placed me in the middle part of each shed, I may or may not be able to tell you which one I'm in. So it's
Yeah,
good to
that could be
have
a
a
great that
resource to kind of differentiate and let me know what to look for.
awesome. Yeah, that's great to hear. Maybe we can add that feature to our platform. We can take people and spin them around and
Guess the venue.
yeah, maybe we can work together on that project.
And you mentioned just a couple of minutes ago that in your other life that you're a business owner. I know you told me before we hit record that you own a restaurant. Give it a little bit of a promotion. What restaurant do you own? Where should we go eat?
So I own a restaurant called Fire on the Mountain Buffalo Wings. And we started in Portland, Oregon, 20 years ago. And we now have 3 restaurants in Portland, one in Bend, Oregon that we opened a couple of years ago. It's been a great ride. We've become an institution here in Portland and now Denver. Our focus is chicken wings. I'm from New York, like yourself. Yeah, I've just always loved hot sauce and chicken wings. And yeah, realized in college that I wanted to open a restaurant. I remember freshman year of college, went to school in Indiana. There were a couple great wing joints there, Buffalo's and Yogi's. And I just remember thinking of like eating wings and drinking beer with friends is pretty much my favorite thing to do. Like I said, I love hot sauce. I love the communal aspect of eating wings and rolling up your sleeves and getting a little messy. And so, yeah, that was kind of the impetus for it. I had always envisioned opening my restaurant like somewhere in the mountains and love the Grateful Dead, hence the love spicy food, hence the name Fire in the Mountain.
An early lightning round question. I know you didn't prepare for this. Drums or flats? You can only pick one.
I can only pick one. I'm going to say flats. I do. This is a question that I have thought about a lot and talked about a lot. We've also asked our customers about this a lot. We'll have some polls on our social media. Ideal world, I love a combination. Like my ideal, like if I, get 6 wings, I want like 4 flats and 2 drums. I do like the combination of it. What about you? What did you say?
I like flats better.
We got you covered there.
Thanks. So just to wrap it up one more time, VenueLlama, to find it, it's just VenueLlama.com, VenueLlama.com. Users can contribute their own information at this point, right?
Yeah, we would love that. We would love that. That's the one thing that we're kind of issue that we're facing is that we haven't been getting as many like reviews as we envision or would want. Yeah, we definitely use some more reviews and comments about venues from folks. And we're also looking at ways where we can just mine that information without people coming to the site, because like you were saying, like surrender to the flow and all like the Reddit threads where there a lot of that information, people are leaving a lot of comments in those places. So we're trying to figure out, is it better for us or maybe a combination to like mine that information and kind of get it onto the website rather than just relying on people writing reviews. I think for us, it's probably going to be a combination of that, but we're always looking for more people to get involved. And, that's what's so great about this community is that people just have lots of great opinions and like to be involved.
All right, Jordan, you ready for the attendance bias lightning round? We've got to know you as a restaurant owner. We know about Fire on the Mountain chicken wings and VenueLlama, of course, but now we got to know who you are with your profile as a fan.
All right, let's do it.
Attendance bias lightning round.
So, Jordan, when was your first Phish show and what do you remember about it?
My first Phish show was 4/10/93 at the Aragon Ballroom in Chicago. What I remember was it felt like there was just such a buzz there. They were just starting I remember feeling like I was seeing, obviously I don't know, but what people must have felt like seeing the Dead, like in the early 70s. Like you were just part of this thing that was amazing, but also sort of in its infancy, but just about to just explode. And just like the excitement and energy was palpable. So there was that, just the excitement and the scene. But then obviously the music. It was a great show. Runaway Jim opener, which I'll take that any day. Just the energy that the band had. Band just doing things that you just have never seen any other band doing. Just like Sugar Blue from who played with the Rolling Stones on an album or two came out during that show. I just remember like my buddy like Sugar Blue. Just this guy comes out and plays harmonica, which is like with the coolest name ever, Sugar Blue.
And how old were you? Like, where were you in your life? Were you in college? Because I know you mentioned going to college in Indiana.
I was a freshman in college. We drove down from Bloomington. Yeah, I had started, I think the first time I listened to Phish was, I think it was like the summer after senior year of high school, listening to Lawn Boy and going to college. Like a lot of our time spent in the dorms freshman year was listening to Lawn Boy. I remember we would sit in my dorm room. Like my dorm room was kind of a hub where people would just come and hang out. For some reason, we had this fluorescent ski pole handle. And a lot of times we would just sit in my room with like the lights out. We would just sit and listen to Lawn Boy and toss around this fluorescent ski pole handle. And I just remember times too, like in the same room. I took trumpet freshman year of college. I remember one time we were just, I don't know, we were goofing around and like playing trumpet to some song on Lawn Boy or like blasting it out the window. I remember one time this guy just walked down the hall, knocked on our door, and he was this African American guy, which we don't often see in our scene. He opens the door, he's like, "What is this?" He's like, "Now this is some music."
Oh, cool.
And yeah, so just like those early days of this, I remember, this is like in, fall of 92, then early 93, just listening to Phish just all the time. And then finally had the opportunity to see him in Chicago. That time too, I was also, just waiting to the Dead and trying to see them whenever I could. But they were also, I guess this was 93 where the Dead were still playing some good shows, but that was about sort of the last real good shows that they were playing. And at the same time, we had this Phish scene. It was just like ascending. I just remember thinking like the potential for these guys is just like how far can these guys take it? That's still happening, remains to be seen.
What's your most recent show, and what did you think of it?
Most recent show was Hollywood Bowl, the Sunday show, 4/27/25. I thought it was a good show. I thought it was really good. Also, that was my first time first time at Hollywood Bowl. I caught the last two shows there, kind of bringing it full circle, just how, the venue plays into the experience. Probably like wasn't the greatest show in the world, but it was a good show. But just being at the Hollywood Bowl was amazing. That show, we had like really good seats, down pretty low, just like a great section of folks. And it turned out there were a bunch of Portland people in our section. It turned out there was actually just like some fans of Fire in the Mountain. I was wearing a Fire in the Mountain hat. It turned out we were next to people who, like, loved the restaurant and ended up becoming friends with them. And just an awesome section of folks, which can add to the experience. Like the night before, we were up high and it just wasn't as great a vibe there. And just like, I don't know, people weren't as nice to each other or as in, more talking and whatnot. But yeah, everything kind of clicked for me like that night at the Hollywood Bowl. And that venue is amazing. Like I said, it was my first time out there. It was one of those venues where I feel like I don't want to miss a run when they go back there.
I've never been. I've seen one show in Los Angeles. It was, I think the date is July 22nd, 2016. It was at the Forum, which was a venue that I loved, absolutely loved. It looked like it was pulled right out of 1976, but the crowd, and I'm sorry, I brought this up a few times on this show, but the LA crowd all the way in the top of a venue, not my favorites. It was almost like people were paid to talk throughout the whole show.
Yeah.
I did not love it. So I could relate to what you're saying about the Hollywood Bowl. That said, the pictures from that venue, going all the way back to when I first discovered it, when I was a little kid getting into the doors, it looks amazing. It looks like one of the most incredible venues constructed in this country.
I was a little surprised going to the venue. I feel like a lot of the pictures that you see are of the stage, and rightfully so. It's a super cool stage, and Kuroda's lights, it's just a perfect template for his lights there. But the thing that surprised me was just the surroundings there. Like to me, it felt like being like at Red Rocks almost in LA. It's just beautiful, like all the trees around and the views, and you don't feel like you're in LA. Yeah, just a beautiful spot. It's really easy to get around.
To bring it back to venues, like you said, next question on the lightning round. If you could pick a venue anywhere in the world that Phish has never played, at least to your knowledge, and you can get them to book a show there, where would you see Phish?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say somewhere that I've never been. I've never been to the venue. I've never been to the country, the continent. The Sydney Opera House.
That's a good answer.
Intrigued. And I don't know much about it, but I've seen pictures and heard things about it, and imagine that the sound is amazing with the orchestras and symphonies that they have there, and just a beautiful looking venue in a super cool area. There's obviously it's exciting to go see Phish in another country, so that would be cool just to meet a completely different part of the world in a beautiful venue with amazing sound and what seems like a great city. My other answer, if they could play somewhere that's not even a venue per se, the Great Sand Dunes National Park in Colorado, which is just an amazing place to go visit and super fun. I remember it was like around the same time where I started seeing Phish, but we were with some friends. We were camping out there and just playing around in the sand dunes, and it's just like this would be such an awesome place for a show.
The next question is a little bit more layered, although it is still venue centric. We're going to stick to that theme until the very end of today's lightning round. Can you
Makes
name a
sense.
venue that you were surprised about how much you liked it the first time you visited? Like maybe you had lower expectations and then you were blown away by it. Does anything come to mind?
I would say the venue that comes to mind is Paolo Soleri in Santa Fe. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. The
I have
now
not.
now de- now defunct venue, and Phish has actually played there. But I saw Widespread Panic there in, gosh, I think it was 2001. It's amazing. You should research it a little bit. This Paolo Soleri is this architect. I think he's now deceased, but from Arizona. He's kind of like a visionary architect, and he actually started this village, like utopian kind of village called Arco Santi. And I'm not even not sure if it exists, but sort of as like a zero waste kind of community out in the desert. Anyway, just an interesting guy. I'm pretty sure he was the architect of this venue too. It's still there. There's always rumors that it's going to come back or that they're going to knock it down, but it exists just like sort of off this side road in Santa Fe. There's a deaf school there. It's just the most amazing venue. The stage is on the same level as the first row. That's the feeling of the venue, is that there's just like no separation between the artist and the band. And it's a small venue. It just kind of like wraps around the stage. I've just never had a feeling like that at a venue where you just felt like it was just one organism, the stage and the crowd. It was so unassuming. There's just like a small little gravel parking lot, and you just walk into the venue, but then it's an amazing place.
What is the weirdest thing you've ever seen at a Phish show?
Yeah, another hard hitting question. I'm gonna go with seeing Phish in Europe at the Christiana at the Grey Hall. I'm not sure if you're familiar with
I am.
with
I know
with
that
those.
show. That was in '98, right? I've had the tape
Yeah,
and I know the whole aura and kind of I don't want to use the word mysticism, but maybe mystery around the whole idea of Christiana in Denmark, right?
yeah. It's this little squatter village in Denmark, and yeah, it was just I saw them there. So I was in Denmark, seeing Phish in Denmark, which was just super cool in and of itself. Yeah, Christiana is this little squatter village, and there's just had all these areas set up where people are just selling like mushroom and weed, just weed and mushroom, just like open, like in these different like kiosks or whatever, just set up like all around the town. They had this big like beer hall type place there where people are just in there, like everybody's just smoking weed and rolling joints. And it was just such an interesting, weird place to see them. Everybody was just sitting down outside the venue, and like the band just had to walk past the crowd to get into the venue. We were just sitting there, and the band just walks right by us. So yeah, that was weird. It was just a weird. It was great. It was just a weird experience. Just something that at that point you definitely couldn't have seen them in a place that small at that point in time. Let alone with the band just like walking right by you to go play.
Hi, everybody. Brian here to welcome you to the set break of today's episode of Attendance Bias. First, thank you for listening. And second, just a quick reminder to tell you that even though Attendance Bias comes to you for free, it does take a lot of work and it does take quite a bit of money to keep the lights on here at production. So I just wanted to ask a small favor if you could support the podcast in any number of the following ways. If you could leave a review or a rating of it on whichever podcast app you use. If you could spread the word, telling a friend or someone you think may be interested in it about it. Or probably the most concrete way is to go to www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donate however much you can financially to help with the continuing costs of Attendance Bias. So thank you again so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the second half of today's episode.
When was this show played?
So the show that we're talking about today, or at least the portion of the show that we're talking about today, is the second half of the second set, roughly about a 35 or 40-minute segment of set 2 of September 3rd, 2022 at Dick's. So this show was the third of 4 nights at Dick's to close the summer 2022 tour. And to me, this summer or the summer of 2022 felt like the first time that Phish played a full tour where we felt back. I say that with capital letters, with emphasis, like without any reservations, because the pandemic, we have to, it feels like a really long time ago. At the time you and I are speaking, it was just 3 years. This show was played. It was not really an afterthought, but it also wasn't always at the forefront of everybody's mind. Like there were still kind of leftovers from the summer of 2021 when Phish was kind of doing their makeup tour when they had to cancel in 2020. So for example, after Mexico in 2022, there was the oddly placed 4-night run at Madison Square Garden in April that turned into kind of the Earth Day show, with the flying dolphins and whales and stuff. Yeah. Because that was delayed from the end of 2021 when Phish decided there was a spike in COVID. We shouldn't play this run. And then there was what Phish called an 8-show spring tour, right? I don't know. I guess I've been convinced that 8 shows can constitute a tour before this 25-show summer tour. I should say, though, that in the summer of 2022, I was not very involved. I wasn't really following Phish that closely. It was the first time since maybe 1996 that was the case because I was getting married on literally the same date that the tour started in Great Woods. So our honeymoon also went to Alaska after we got married in Oregon. And for the most part, we weren't in like the most remote areas in the world, but cell service was still kind of spotty. And also I was even though it's an American state, obviously it's completely foreign in terms of its not just climate, but also just I've never been there before. It was a completely different area of the world for me. So Phish was a million miles away. The only other thing that really kept creeping into my head about Phish was they were playing Jones Beach that year, and I wasn't going to be there to see it because I consider that something of a hometown venue. But I was kind of off the grid for the summer 2022. But what did seep through my social media, and for the very short times I was able to receive text messages, were that jams were coming from unexpected places, such as the 17-minute version of Leaves from Jones Beach. Trey was doing something weird with his vocals, which no one could really explain it to me, but it would come to known as the vocal stylings or Broadway Trey. And people started complaining about too many repeats. Although when I look back at when I look back over the set lists after I got home toward the end of July, it doesn't really bear out in reality when you compare it to previous tours because they're always repeating songs. It's part of the experience of shaking out these songs. In 2022, I was only, at least in the summer, I was only able to see the Atlantic City run, which was toward the end of the tour. So what were your general memories and your impressions, if you could remember, from the summer of 2022 in the world of Phish?
I don't remember a ton, but like what you were saying, as far as like, we were still kind of out of COVID. I had actually got COVID seeing them in Vegas, like during that Halloween run.
It seems like everybody did.
Yeah.
I don't mean to laugh about it, but it seemed to be everybody's story.
For sure. Yeah. That was, speaking of venues that did not run things well, like
the MGM, right?
And the MGM, like that was, really all part of it. Just like the lines and just how hot and sweaty it was in there. I don't know how much I listened to that tour, but I went and saw them at Alpine Valley. I think that was the last run before the Dick's run. And I had never been to Alpine Valley, and that was, getting back to the venues. Like I just, always heard about Alpine Valley and all the, classic Phish shows and Dead shows back in the day. And having gone to school in the Midwest, just have a lot of friends in the area. So just really wanted to catch them at Alpine Valley and did. And the shows were pretty good. I remember yeah, it was great to be at Alpine Valley and it was a lot of fun. The shows were like a little, slightly inconsistent, but so that's kind of my memory from that. Just parts of the shows that were great, and I remember the Sunday show at Alpine Valley was the first set was not that great, and I haven't been to a show in a while where just there was like a mass exodus during the first set there. There was like I don't know, it was like Sugar Shack and I don't know, a couple other songs you could argue that are throwaway songs. So there's like a mass exodus there. People are like, all right, one song, and then like three songs in a row that are kind of can be looked at as bathroom songs. But anyway, great time there. Yeah, went and caught them at Dick. So those are, my memories are from that Alpine run and then the couple shows at Dick's that I saw. So yeah, I don't know. It seemed like they were like maybe some moments of brilliance, but not as consistent as they've been recently.
So our segment today is the end of set 2 of night 3 of Dick's. It's hard for me sometimes to keep numbers straight in my head if I'm not reading it straight off some notes.
You seem like you do a good job. But...
I try. Thank you. I try. I could do it here on a podcast talking about Phish. I can't do it in any other aspect of my entire life. But do you remember what the show was like or any memories of the show up to this point? Because like I said at the top of our conversation, it's the Moma Dance into No Quarter, 2001, and Split Open and Melt, which closes the set. Do you remember anything about the show before the Moma Dance?
Yeah, a little bit. I remember like Walls of the Cave in the first set had an interesting placement. It was like early on maybe like the third song or something like that. I like that song. I feel like that's one of those songs that some people hate it. I mean, like lots of songs, but I feel like that's one of the ones that strong feelings on both sides of the aisle. But I happened to like the song, and I thought that was cool to just get it in an interesting spot in the show. There was just a really good Walls of the Cave too. I think it could be one of those versions where if somebody is not necessarily into that song, they could go listen to that version and possibly be converted. What else? They had busted out Thunderhead at that show, which at the time I had forgotten what it was. And funny thing is I had actually been at the last show in Denver, the last time that they played Thunderhead in 2003. But yeah, I don't remember a ton about the show before that segment. Just a couple of those. I have to look at the set list and probably jog my memory.
Well, the part that we're going to discuss is the beginning of the Moma Dance, which comes in from that Thunderhead. That Thunderhead was played before the Moma Dance, first time in 544 shows. Ridiculous. And a thing that can only happen in Phish, that you were there for the previous version too. Right, after 544 shows, you skip all of them, let's say. You're there for the same song previously and at the time. Like I said at the top of our conversation, there is some immaculate sound from this audience recording, and this Moma has a really nice, peppy tempo. It's very melodic, type 1 guitar playing, and then they settle into the rhythm for the song. And you could hear Trey testing out backing vocals, which he did not used to do. And then Mike starts playing with the vocal melody. They start doing not quite a vocal jam, but they're doing it differently than they normally do.
Definitely. Yeah, I went back and listened to it. I remember that kind of jumping out at me. There's some different vocal stylings going on in that song. Seemed like they were kind of experimenting a little bit. Yeah, and that song too, like talking about placement, we always feel like hear that as like a second song or an opener. I'm not like a huge Moma Dance fan or anything. A lot of times I am like, oh, we're hearing Moma Dance again, but this particular Moma Dance, like it just really gets cooking at the end.
Yeah, it
Um,
does. And it gets cooking quickly. The
yeah,
opening part of the song I wrote down is over at 3.5 minutes. And then the band
yeah,
is moving fast. They immediately go into the up the rigging, taking sail. Like there's usually a little bit of a cool down between the song
right.
and that part, but there's no cool down. They just keep it steady and they just keep vamping. And you can tell that they're having fun because, like I said, they keep messing around with the vocal arrangement. And I guess this is kind of what people meant when they were telling me Trey is doing something weird with the vocals. It's not Broadway Trey, but they are having fun with something they've done 100 times before.
I wonder too what you were saying, at some point, maybe you know this, it sounds like Trey started working with a vocal coach. I wonder if it was around that time, or maybe he was kind of learning some new tricks or something.
I don't know for sure. I've heard the same thing. I heard that whoever Dave Matthews works with for his vocals to keep them steady as he gets older, I heard that Trey started kind of, for lack of a better phrase, taking lessons. Like you might take piano lessons after school. You know, that
Yeah,
Trey tried to turn, I guess, what you could call a weakness into a strength. And I don't know if it was around this time or a little bit before this time, but I heard the same rumor. They vamped for a while. Page takes a lead at around 6 minutes, which is not the usual way that the Moma Dance jam goes. It doesn't last for long, though, because Trey starts noodling and switching back to his rhythm guitar, which I love. And
hmm,
you mentioned that this is a high profile spot in the set list. They usually play it in the second song of the whole show. You could kind of make a
right.
lot of money banking on the Moma Dance as a follow up to whatever they open with. But this is right in the heart of the second set. So it makes sense they're kind of taking it for a walk, that they're not playing it the usual way because they're not playing it at the usual time.
Right. Yeah. Good point.
And toward the end, you mentioned how it gets cooking. About 9.5 minutes, he being Trey, pulls out what I describe, this is my musical vocabulary, a squealy extra electric guitar tone. It sounds great. I just
Yeah.
wonder how it sounded in person or on the soundboard because I'm listening to an audience recording. So he is cooking here, reaching a serious peak at around 12 minutes. And it makes me think, as I was listening, that this is starting to enter the conversation, or at least the ballpark, of best versions ever of the Moma Dance. But then it ends 1 minute later.
Yeah, I like your description of it because like when I listen to it, there's just something about his guitar that sounds different. And I couldn't necessarily place it like Hendrix-esque or something. It just sounds like such a thick, like muscular tone and just he's just feeling it. It just sounds like classic rock guitar.
Yeah, very much.
I
This
don't
whole
even
segment is made up of classic rock guitar. They drop right into no quarter at the end of the
yeah,
Moma Dance. And if anyone listening has ever been in attendance, they've only played it a small handful of times, but when they start
20
playing no
times.
quarter, 20, okay, even less than I thought it was. When
I did a
Paige
little
starts
research.
playing, thank you. When Paige starts playing that first keyboard part, the do 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 do,
Yeah.
it's the whole place,
The
no matter where you are, goes nuts. And you could
that
hear the
is part
beginnings of it, right?
Yeah, that's part of it for me. Just going into like no quarter. It's just such a unique, talking about classic rock and one of the best classic rock songs ever. House of the Holy was the first CD that I ever owned back in ninth grade. Just like always loved Houses of the Holy. I just remember listening to that album just like on CD, having never listened to CDs and just the sound quality and so that album and song just has a special place in my classic rock heart. And then just like the opening, like we were saying, it's not often that they play it. And just like the intro to that song, it's just like eerie, haunting, super psychedelic. Yeah, just there's just not many bands that could do that justice.
Right. And when you think about
Yeah,
Phish vocals, we were talking about Trey, whether he's taking or has taken vocal coaching or vocal lessons. The first band you think of when it comes to killer vocals, it's probably Led Zeppelin, somewhere near the top. The
yeah,
Who, Led Zeppelin, Queen, the best singers of that classic rock genre. Phish, their vocals are typically their weakest point. So it really shouldn't
yeah,
make sense that they can present no quarter with such power, but no one thinks
yeah,
twice. They kill it.
yeah, absolutely. And then I think you get the like the reverb too, which kind of just adds another dimension to it. I just remember at that point the crowd was just that huge venue at Dick's. The crowd was just wrapped. It's just like everybody was just dialed in. Talking about people like talking at shows like there wasn't that happening at all at that point.
Well, we're two songs into the four-song segment of this. Let me ask you, why did you choose this segment? Why do you have attendance bias toward it before we go into 2001?
Yeah, like I was saying, it just felt like such a perfect encapsulation of Phish. Just like the switching of, you have Moma Dance, which is just a unique song, just a unique song structure. Like you get even just the name of the song and the lyrics, like your classic like play on words with Phish, like Moma Dance, or they say Moma Dance, Moma Dance. Just an interesting song. Like I said, not my favorite song in the world, but it's an interesting song and a great version of it. Super funky. It's even kind of hard to describe what Moma Dance is, but just a unique type of song that many bands don't. Just very fishy. Then you drop into one of the best songs ever, a rarely played song, just a super, kind of dark song. Late in the second set, just no quarter, just the message about no quarter, like no surrender. Like we're at this point in the show, we're just gonna let loose here. So then you just have like the funky Moma Dance into the eerie, psychedelic, rare, trippy, awesome classic rock song. And then switch into 2001, just a funky, super dance party after that. I remember like during, talking about being there at the show, just like the height of 2001, I don't know if you've been at a show where somebody just like pops like the confetti cork thing
confetti
that some
cannon,
people
yeah,
have.
for sure.
Yeah, confetti cannon. I think it was the first time I experienced that, but somebody set that off at like the exact right moment. They just nailed it. Talking about attendance bias, that was just like one of those things that you can't experience on your couch. It was just like so perfect and well timed, and just like sometimes you'll be at a show and somebody does something like that, or a glow stick war or whatever it might be, that's just like ill timed. Like, but like at that point you felt it, like that was kind of the apex of the show right there.
I'll give credit to the
like
confetti cannon people. They seem on point.
Yeah, for sure.
They know when
Not
to
an
do
easy
it.
job. Trying to figure out where to buy one of those things.
That's step one.
Yeah.
You know the music. Now you got to get the tools to explode the confetti. But this 2001, it's almost taken for granted how smooth and funky it is. And even within this shorter version, I think it's only like 13 or 9 minutes. It's not that long. There's some back and forth improvisation at around 5 minutes, about halfway through it. And it turns to stop, start jamming at 6 minutes. That changes octaves. Even Fishman gets involved. He's not always the one, especially during 2001, to melodically contribute, because he's usually locked down with the rhythm, with the drum beat. But this is a really solid 9-minute 2001 that you could just easily package and hand to someone and say, here, this is what I love about Phish.
Absolutely. I appreciate hearing your take on that. Yeah, sometimes I don't like what you're explaining. I don't even like have like necessarily like the musical knowledge to like pinpoint that. It's great. Yeah, it's great hearing your take on that. I don't have like that deep necessarily like musical knowledge and know like, oh, he's switching octaves here or going into like a major chordal whatever. Like I have been one to always like deep dive into that stuff. So like a little hesitant coming on. I'm like, haven't been that guy who like can delve that deep into it. But I totally appreciate hearing, learn too from hearing people talk about stuff like that and reading reviews about, hearing the show in that way.
Well, thank you for saying that, but also don't forget you're deep in the venue at the end of a second set, at the end of a show, while I'm on my couch 3 years later in air conditioning, just listening back to it. So there's also,
Right.
there's different contexts. As you know, the venues make a difference when you're there. And then
Absolutely.
the whole segment closes with Split Open and Melt. And I told you this right as we were emailing back and forth to decide which segment we should discuss. I have kind of a difficult love-hate relationship with Split Open and Melt in 3.0. So when it begins to go off track at a little bit after 5 minutes, I'm kind of hesitant to get excited. It takes a turn into weird, almost like dial
Yeah.
tone noises, which was very common in this summer. You know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about?
No, for sure. It definitely gets it makes me think like if you're like at this show, or a show where they're playing Split Open Melt like that, and like you have brought somebody to the show that has never seen Phish before, like it's risky, that person could, even if you're, have seen Phish a ton of times, it just gets into, yeah, just very dissonant, discordant sounds at that point where I could see that, somebody like new to Phish, either like being turned off or like completely surprised, or someone like had like a preconception. Oh, I thought Phish was all like these happy, bouncy, hippie songs. And then you go and you experience like a Split Open and Melt like that, just being very surprised. But there's something I think also cool about that because I feel like in that version, it's kind of getting to the point where, all right, how, and then kind of like the beauty of that song too, which is also like probably part of like the love hate part of it, where it
Mm-hmm.
just can get a little maybe arguably too weird. But then they bring it back in, just at the point where you're like, how long is it? How long are they going to be, dissonant or whatever? And then it all, ties back in.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on both sides of it. So,
Yeah.
it could be either I'm totally melting into a mental puddle over here, and I'm loving every second of it as it's ripping my chest bone out as I can't see straight. Or it's, I'm going to go to the bathroom now so I could come back for the encore and not have to worry about missing anything there, because we all know that you should never, ever miss the encore at Dick's.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Which in this case was Fee and Slave to the Traffic Light, which is an epic ending to any show.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that was a nice ending after that for sure.
Well, Jordan, thank you today for coming on to the podcast to tell us about VenueLlama, to tell us about Fire on the Mountain, and then more detail to tell us about the Moma Dance No Quarter 2001 and Split Open and Melt from September 3rd, 2022 at Dick's. One more time, can you just plug everything you have to plug, the website as well as the restaurant?
Yeah, for sure. VenueLlama is a platform where we're trying to make the concert experience just better for everybody. Just providing information about the venues and information about locally owned businesses that are owned by fellow Phish heads. We're also providing content, just talking to people that run venues. We're also doing features on Instagram. We featured you on there. We're featuring fans, that go to lots of shows, asking them questions, just a few simple questions about venues. And so we're just trying to, just get as much conversation as possible about venues and ways to just make the experience just better and more hassle-free and keeping it fun and interesting at the same time.
So anyone listening, if you have a venue that you love, or at least that you know a lot about, go onto Instagram or go to VenueLlama.com, get in touch with Jordan and share what you know for everyone, for the benefit of all.
Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure being on here.
And that's it for today's episode. Jordan and I discussed quite a bit of history, so we have a fairly in-depth fact check today.
Attendance bias fact check.
First, the Tweeter Center is no longer an active corporate sponsorship name to any of the several venues that I visited in the early to mid-2000s, when it seemed like every state along the I-95 Northeast Corridor had a shed called the Tweeter Center. For what it's worth, I do not think that the people at the Forest Hills Stadium are jerks. I think they are among the best staff of any concert venue in the country. It was just the first venue that came to mind in the conversation at that point. Jordan's first show, April 10th, 1993, at the Aragon Ballroom in Chicago, featured Sugar Blue on harmonica, as Jordan describes. The Chicago Bluesmen came on stage toward the end of set 2 and played on Funky Bitch, Help Me, Hoochie Coochie Man, and Cavern. The show at the LA Forum that I did not enjoy was on July 22nd, 2016. As much as the crowd disappointed me, I would love to go back to the Forum. In a heartbeat. Love that venue. Jordan gave a detailed and loving description of the Paulo Soleri Amphitheater in Santa Fe, New Mexico. The amphitheater was still standing as of 2022 and was never considered complete by its architect, the titular Paulo Soleri. Incidentally, Phish once played a show there on May 10th, 1994. Jordan would have seen Widespread Panic there on either June 19th and or June 20th, 2001. The show in Christiania, Denmark was on June 30th, 1998. According to Phish.com, the venue is a former horse barn made out of stone with a wooden roof built in 1891 that was turned into a 1,500-person capacity music venue in 1970 in the Freetown Christiania section of Copenhagen. It was the first show of a 3-night stand, their first 3-nighter abroad, and the show was sold out. When Jordan describes the Alpine Valley show from the summer of 2022 as not having the best first set causing a mass exodus, his words, here's what I found. The show was on Sunday, August 14th, 2022, and at the end of the first set, they played Sugar Shack, Shade, Halfway to the Moon, and closed with Everything's Right. I'm not judging, but I think we could all find a time to go to the bathroom during that segment if needed. And that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank Jordan for joining me today, Phish.net for their help with the fact check, Phish.in for the recording used in today's episode, the Mockingbird Foundation for everything they do to further children's music education in schools. And if you enjoy Attendance Bias, please support the show. You can visit www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donate anything you can. You can also leave a review or a rating anywhere you listen to the podcast. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next week on Attendance Bias.